Shout out to my YouTube members. That's you. You include on the Do Witchcraft tier who can actually see this video. Queen Slut, Aqua Bunny, Taper Clip, Gassy Hall, Duncan 264, Duncan 264, Anime Professor, Zen Huxtable. This list keeps resetting on me as I scroll down, and it's very, very annoying. Hewan, Zerakiel, GigaDonk, Gary Always, The Anime Guru, VigRocks 67, Towelcat, Brody, Z-Cypher, and Denakori. Thank you all very much, as well as on the sponsor good tier, Night Night, Asapi, and ASC Presents. I also listed Gary Always on the wrong tier, but whatever. Gary, maybe you'll end up on this tier eventually, and you'll see this video. I'm going to talk about the Thunderbolts, or Thunderbolts. I'm not sure if it has the... It's a Marvel movie, I think probably still the latest one, because it's still in theaters. Part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Very much a, like... You have to be pretty tapped into the plot to totally understand what's happening in this movie and appreciate it. Or know who any of the fucking characters are, or follow the threads of their stories. Some of them, it legitimately took me a while to realize who they were, and that I knew who they were. I think Ghost had probably been on screen for... I mean, it was whenever somebody finally said, "Oh, Ghost," you know? And I was like, oh, that was... Oh, of course. And then at some point, you know, I knew the Captain America knockoff guy, even though I only saw 2 episodes of the Captain America TV show. I think it was a Captain America TV show? I don't remember what the fuck the show was actually called. No, it was the Falcon, right? Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That's what it was called. It was Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I watched like 2 episodes of that, so I don't really know how that left off, but that show dovetails right into this movie. And Black Widow also dovetails right into this movie in the sense that this is practically a direct sequel to Black Widow. And Ghost is from the Ant-Man franchise, and I think she showed up in one of the TV shows. I don't even remember which. And then there was Bucky himself, the Winter Soldier, whom I did not recognize, like the actor's face, just wearing like a suit and being uncomfortable around politics. I was just like, oh, who's this guy they're setting up? And then at some point they like reveal that it's him, and I'm like, oh, right, I'm an idiot. Of course that was Bucky, of course. But I'm not an idiot. It's just been a while. I've been through a lot since the last time I was really invested in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which was really only a short period of my life so far, because I didn't watch these movies really as they were coming out. I saw the Iron Man movies, I saw the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and that's a firework, and I saw the first Avengers, like, in theaters, and I think Iron Man 3 was like the last one I had seen in theaters for a long... Or, and Guardians 2 were the last ones I had seen in theaters for a long time, and again, I'd skipped over a lot of them. So I just kind of had given up on the idea that I would ever follow the plot or see these movies outside of the couple franchises I was interested in. But then, when I got with Bird, he was very caught up on the whole thing. He's a fan of the movies. Him and Riley would talk about them all the time. And so, in order for me to literally like understand these movies and be able to go see them with him, he was very enthusiastic to get me to watch them. And so when Disney Plus put all of them in a very convenient playlist, and interestingly enough, they did it in chronological order, at least one of the playlists. And if you're going to watch these movies, I really do, or this whole franchise rather, I really do recommend watching it in chronological order, because the way the films were released made things really muddy, because there's lots of things that they, you know, retconned and added in, and some of the films just came out in the wrong order thanks to COVID and other, you know, production issues. And so, you know, you have stuff like where for everyone else, Black Widow felt like this bizarre afterthought, because the character, spoiler alert if you haven't seen these MCU movies, I'm going to be spoiling all of them because you have to have seen all of them to have context for this one. But Black Widow dies in the last Avengers movie. And the Black Widow movie comes out after that. Like, came out after that. And so, at the time, a lot of people just didn't care because they were like, well, she's already dead. Like, what is there to say about her? Why resolve this narrative now, you know? But if you watch the movies in chronological order, where that one comes before the last one, you know, then it doesn't feel weird and jarring. It feels like the natural course. And then her arc completes in that last movie, you know? It's just, there was something missing from her. Even though people still resonated with her death scene in the final film, you know, her character had not really gotten fleshed out on the level that she would have been if that movie had existed beforehand. But because she was already dead, it kind of felt like a weird retroactive, why are we fleshing out this character now and she's already gone? And a lot of it is also just to set up Yelena Belova, who is the sort of successor Black Widow, the next best from the program, which was like a child assassin raising program, basically. Again, like, all of her backstory is really explained in this Black Widow movie, and I tend to refer to Yelena as White Widow. They have not given her like a superhero name; they just call her Yelena. Sure, I don't know why. White Widow seems like it's so obvious; it's just there. It's also one of the names she has been given in the comics. I at one point started writing a White Widow movie script because I had so many ideas about this character after seeing her in the film, and there's not really a lot of comics that she's been in. You know, she's like a fairly obscure character. So the fact that she's played by Florence Pugh, who's a fantastic actress, who just has like I don't know, a rawness that's not really in any of the other heroes in the MCU. You know, she's the most hard-ass chick in the whole thing, and she's very fun to watch. So I loved her in Black Widow. I never saw the show she's in. I think it's like Echo or something. Maybe she's in the fucking Hawkeye show. I haven't seen most of the shows. Like, and when I finally did watch all the MCU movies with Bird, like, it started basically with us watching Moon Knight and Loki, which were like the start of them doing all the TV shows. And we loved both of those, and that was what led us into watching chronologically everything that had led up to them. And then we somewhat kept up with the shows for a little while, but there was just so much culture war bullshit surrounding the MCU that just makes it so fucking hard to talk about. Like, I just want to be like, yeah, I saw this cool movie and here's my thoughts on it. And it's like, if you don't address all of these like supposed elephants in the room, but they're not really. They're actually like the film itself like becomes a shadow version of itself that other communities can, like, you know, create and maintain their shadow version of it. And they talk about it like that is the movie, but it's not. You know, like, a lot of the times they haven't seen it. It's like the whole community, you know, just hasn't even seen this movie, but they want to engage with the idea of it as a culture product. So they formulate these opinions, and they act like there's all this obvious, like, stuff going on that, you know, you could easily ignore. Most audiences do, and, like, have a great experience. This is something that Bird's been really upset about lately, because he's been catching up on, like, the Star Wars franchise and a lot of these shows that, like, Culture Warriors, you know, complained about, and they all said that these shows had bad writing and everything, and that, like, on top of being woke or whatever. But he's like, if you watch these shows, there's nothing to be upset about as TV shows unless you were, you know, bigoted. So, like, his conclusion was basically, yeah, I don't know how to take it seriously, these people who are saying all this stuff about these shows, like, you know, just finding reasons to dislike something woke, as opposed to finding reasons that it is why it actually, what is the story it's actually telling, you know, like, they're not engaging with the material. I really am of the opinion that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is kind of the highest level filmmaking that really, like, exists. And when I say highest level, I don't mean that it's, like, the best or the artsiest or the most, like, even flexible or capable per se. I just think that it takes the most effort. Like, it's the hardest thing to do, is to pull off like a giant crowd-pleasing spectacle over and over and over again, and keep it meaningful, keep it refreshing, find new ways to make it work. And this film is specifically about like the burnout of the MCU. There's a lot of what I'm going to call smark writing in this movie, similar to Deadpool 3, where there's a lot of commentary on the nature of the film's existence in the cultural pocket that it's in. And with the MCU especially, like, I've had this read on the series that it is basically about resetting Hollywood. Like, what the core themes of the series, if you go back from Iron Man, starting from there, if you draw the comparison of Jon Favreau and what's his name, the producer who does all the, who produces the whole thing, the couple of producers, if you compare the group that Marvel was forming to create the MCU to Iron Man, then look at what's his fuck, the character that fucking the Big Lebowski played in Iron Man as Harvey Weinstein. It basically reads as, we're going to create an industry underneath of you that does not that doesn't have to hide all of these dark secrets. Like, they're basically using the US government as a metaphor for the film industry in these movies, and for undercutting these like problematic producers and like rooting out these evil elements within the industry. And it's been kind of interesting to watch how a lot of the people who end up working on the DC movies are like crash outs and weirdos and people who like have terrible public images, and the Marvel team is always like the squeakiest. But a lot of them are redeemed celebrities. Like, it starts with Robert Downey Jr., a guy who very famously was like a drug addict in the 90s and kind of had lost his career for a while, making a big comeback, cleaning himself up, becoming a public-facing, dad. And that's kind of the energy around the Marvel franchise. And I don't know how honest it is, I don't know how good the people involved really are, but that is definitely what it projects, is this idea that like we're taking movies and we're making them something that we can show the world, because the world is the stage for movies now, and the media that's translated worldwide from the United States the most has been superheroes, comic book heroes. When you think Western media, Western cartoons, Western comics, you think superheroes, and those characters are tremendous all over the world. Now more so than ever because of these movies. So, like, they want something sustainable. They want something where the people involved can stay involved for decades, and it will always, pay the bills for them and their families and their families and all that shit. So, that theme of sustainability, like, runs heavily through the Marvel franchise. And it turns into a commentary on itself because of that. That like the characters in the movies are trying to accomplish what the actors are trying to accomplish by making the movies. What the producers, the writers, what everyone involved wants out of their career, they're writing it directly into the films. And I think that this was working really well for them up until when they started expanding the universe. And it was one part that COVID really fucked things up. Because it messed up the release schedule, because it inflamed culture war bullshit online so much, because suddenly everybody was on the internet, I think it really caused this nosedive in Marvel that they were kind of pulling up from. I think that the TV shows and stuff were working at first, but then when you got the 1-2 punch of when I say 1-2 punch, because he played a boxer in the Creed 2 or 3 or whatever Creed they were on. I haven't seen those movies. God damn it, why is his name not in my head? Amazing actor, bad dude. But he he was like the guy who was playing King the Conqueror is who I'm talking about. I loved him in Loki, loved him in the Ant-Man movie, and then he basically ruined his career, and they had to totally gear shift and basically pretend that they weren't setting that up at all. Like, they set up for King to basically be the villain of like every Marvel villain going forward, and then they had to thoroughly throw that away. Because again, the whole image of this franchise is that it's the clean one. It's the one that doesn't have all the crash outs and fuck ups. You can find those over on the DC movies, you know. This is a franchise mostly about found family at this point. Most of the heroes like have kids at this point. Most of the actors have like grown children at this point, if not at the very least like, you know, 8 or 9 year olds. So like these are like grown up. They're movies made by grown-ups from a grown-up perspective to be accessible both to grown-ups and to children so that you can watch them as a family. And this is probably one of the least family-friendly Marvel movies, even though it's a lot less dark than the Suicide Squad movies, which like go out of their way to be like, all right, this is a dark take on the superhero thing. You know, these are the bad guys. These are the fuck-ups, the burnouts, you know. But in the case of Marvel, their fuck-ups and burnouts are not nearly as, you know, as... They're not as violent or as mean or as unlikable as the ones that are in the DC movies, you know. Granted, I think The Suicide Squad, the second attempt, was a very fun movie. And the characters were engaging, and it was probably overall like a better movie experience than Thunderbolts. But I think Thunderbolts has more heart, more to say, and is ultimately a great fit for the Marvel franchise. You know, like it manages to keep it cynical without being like... I mean, actually, I would say this about Deadpool 2. Deadpool 3. Even though that's like a kind of Marvel Cinematic Universe crossover with the Sony franchise, and it is like obviously way more violent and like mean-spirited than Thunderbolts. It still has like a very Genki energy, you know, like it's cutesy, you know, it's kind of gay. It's like, it's just like a good time. Thunderbolts is more dry. It's not nearly as like you know, goofy and silly, but it is still again light work. You know, it is in that Marvel way a light, breezy, fun film about being a not light, breezy, or fun person. And I think that's where I really connect with it, is that like I'm this type of a person, the type who like stares out a window for hours thinking about making a Marvel video and then gets in front of a camera and rants for way longer than I thought I was going to about that Marvel movie. So like in a stone cold you know, not particularly expressive fashion, I feel Yelena. And even though this is not what the character is, I really think the reason that Florence Pugh brings this out so well, and I have to assume this is a lot of her core as an actress, is that apparently during her teen years she spent a lot of time hospitalized. So she just was alone, isolated, and, you know, probably staring into space for most of the day, not really knowing if she was going to ever like live a life. And then eventually becomes a tremendously famous actress, you know. So even if she might be like happy now, I'm sure she can easily tap into that void gazing, which this movie uses the word void a lot, and I was prepared for them to say the word void gaze. I was like, it could happen. They could literally say gaze into the void. They come close. The terminology is close enough. Major movies are always ripping me off. But, you know, what else is new? I expect that. That's why I give my ideas away for free, is because somebody's going to make it real and make it good, and I'm not. It's not going to be me. But this is a movie about void gazing, about being a void gazer, something I think Florence Pugh has done and therefore taps into very well. and that, you know, the characters in the movie are set up really well to have this relationship of why they are all void gazers. You know, like, what is the void that's inside of each of them that they're trying to suppress and not to really, like, talk about or let out, because they're just trying to do their jobs and live their lives. You know, they're like, I got all this stuff, but what can you do, you know, other than keep going? And it's like, basically, they're putting themselves in a situation to just keep doubling down. You know, all of these characters they basically have the mindset that's like, well, I'm already in this dark place, so, you know, why fight it? I'm gonna be there, or I'm gonna be eliminated, you know. And then the movie's kind of about deciding, nah, I'm going to chase the light. I'm going to understand that the void is behind me, but I'm going to walk in the other direction, you know, towards the light. And that's sort of the thematic arc of the film. But it's explored really well through all these different characters, and I'm like trying to decide if I'm going to try to deep dive this whole ass movie, because I feel like it's going to take a while. But I also know that my student GigaDonk will really appreciate it. She was the one who ultimately, like, I probably wasn't going to see this movie in theaters if not for the fact that Giga had told me it was really good and that I would like it and that it has a lot of Yelena, and I was like, okay, well, that's pretty strong selling points. And we saw it at Cinema Cafe, you know, like right up against the screen, because we were the last people. I didn't expect it to be like crowded or anything, but it was, surprisingly. I guess Sunday afternoon, probably the most populated, you know, lunch showing. But we were there, and I was like, I was vibing with it right away. I wasn't sure if it was going to be like a great movie, you know, like it felt like a solid, entertaining romp. What really surprised me more than anything about this movie, just, you know, staying in the realm of broad review terms, is that the third act is the best part. And I don't know if that's true about any other Marvel movies. Maybe Avengers the last two Avengers movies, like, even then, no, not even the last Avengers movie, because the last third of that is fine, but I wouldn't call it the best part. Obviously the snap is at the end of Infinity War is a pretty legendary ending, but like, most of the time the films just evolve into a sound and light show. You know, it's just about beating the bad guy. It's like all the emotional arcs have been resolved. We just got to beat the bad guy now. Sometimes there's like a great post-action... Like, Guardians 2 is the one I feel the most conflicted about, right? Because I love that movie, and I don't think the final action scene is very good. It's just too long, too chaotic, too hard to tell what's going on or really care about it. And you know that nobody's going to die, you know? So then, at the end, there's then the funeral for Yondu, and that part's great. You know, like, that part makes me cry, but... like, it's just not that exciting getting to it. This movie, legitimately, like, the way it resolves all of the character arcs through the finale was really cool, and the fact that it doesn't devolve into just a big dizzying action scene. If anything, first of all, it's very rescue focused, which is something that's missing from a lot of these big hero movies. Is like, when the city starts getting destroyed, you need to show the heroes rescuing people. And in this case, it's also a great, like, demonstration of power difference moment where, like, you know, these guys, the heroes of this film, are all ground level heroes. Some of them have, like, kind of super strength, you know, but, like, not anything serious. They're just, like, good, you know, they're just good tactical fighters on, like, a normal level. And so the villain they're going up against in this film, we'll call him a pseudo villain. Interestingly, no one gets like killed in this, like, or I mean, a lot of people do die, but they're like random mooks, you know. There's not like a death there's no killing a bad guy in this movie. There's, in fact, the bad guys kind of win. They kind of just win, but in a way that the good guys win too. Everybody wins. Actually, that hadn't really occurred to me, but everybody kind of wins in this movie. It's a win-win situation. But it's also a situation where, like, the heroes seem tremendously underpowered to deal with it because of the depth of the power that they're fighting against. But in the end, empathy is all that's necessary to win the situation. You know, it turns out that the reality of what's going on isn't something that requires great, you know, physical strength to resolve. It is just to bring the villain down, you know, and resolve the situation naturally. So yeah, it's like one of the most peaceful in that way hero films. Like, in spite of its kind of like dour tone, it's not like a bright and colorful. The characters are all like kind of edgy assholes, but they clearly don't want to be. I think that's what really makes it stand apart from Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad, the characters are fully embracing themselves. They're just assholes, you know. In this movie, you have the sense that all of these are characters who really want to be heroes, you know, but they just come from such fucked circumstances that they don't know how they would be that, you know. Like, Yelena was trained to kill people her whole life. And we see some really fucked, you know, like on an emotional level, fucked up scenes in this movie about what these characters had to do as kids, which, like, I'm pretty numb to this type of content. So, like, me watching it was like, yeah, this is cool, you know, but, like, I'm thinking about me as a teen. If I had seen this movie, I think it would have affected me really hard. I think, like, this is exactly the kind of thing that I would have liked to see when I was like 16 or 17. To you know, as like a something that recognizes, you know, how dark things really can be, but again strives for the light, strives to be brighter, strives not to be dark and wallow in that feeling. And I think it does a great job of like maintaining that very specific tone throughout the film. You know, it never feels like it dips into being like a glowering, dark, moody thing. It's more emotionally distant, you know. There's a fight scene towards the start. Yelena's basically talking about just kind of being bored with her circumstances. Like, she feels drained. She doesn't feel like she's really doing anything. She's kind of spinning her wheels, killing a lot of people for the government, you know. And there's like a hallway fight scene, but that's entirely top down. And the choreography is fine, but like what makes the scene great is that it feels emotionally distant. You don't feel the intensity of being in the fight. It just is like a fight that's happening over there, and you're just it feels cold, you know. And as she goes down the hallway, there's a light only on one side of it, so her shadow keeps getting longer as she crosses the hall, which ends up being a theme throughout the visual motif later in the movie, because the villain starts turning people into like Hiroshima shadows, and it turns out that it's actually the long shadow their past and their trauma is casting over them is like thematically what that stands for. Because when you get trapped in the shadow with this guy Bob, then or Century, he basically you get shown your most like shameful memory, like the time that you like the most traumatizing thing you did to yourself, essentially, is what you end up seeing in this shadow. And so yeah, it's very much a film about trauma and about how we cope with trauma and about being willing to explore it and like vindicate yourself, you know, to like look back into your past and figure out like what was really going on here. Was this really my fault? Can this be forgiven? Would I let this happen now? You know, like, and the characters all kind of coming to that conclusion of like, no, I've changed, I'm different, I would not, like, you know, it's because I've can address these mistakes, I can make sure I don't, you know, make them again. And so, you know, it ended up being, again, like a surprisingly deep movie, considering that a lot of this was really saved. Like, they build up to the idea that it's about trauma throughout the movie, but it's really in the third act where the villain's power takes everyone into like this interconnected labyrinth of what Yelena in an incredible writing moment just says, well, I've been going through a labyrinth of interconnected shame rooms all over New York City, you know? And I was just like, oh, all right, that's what's happening. I really do think writing a movie like this is incredibly hard. And if I was going to go into every little detail of it, I think I'd have to watch it again and go over the script. There's so many times that, again, it comments on its own existence, its own place in the Marvel Universe as this thing that's kind of gotten tired. You know, people are tired of it. The opening part of the movie, Yelena's basically complaining about film tropes. Like, she's complaining about the fact that she's been on this mission so many times and the same key things always happen, you know, and they're all like movie tropes. So it's basically her complaining about the fact that she's trapped in a generic action film lifestyle, you know, and she wants to break out of that and be, you know, be living, I guess, a generic superhero lifestyle instead. But alright, so the half of this video that you've already seen, I recorded like 4 nights ago, and I ended up passing out not too long after. I filled up my camera is the reason I stopped, and then I just kind of fell asleep, and ever since I've been really zoned out. And even before making that video, I had already, after seeing the movie, like crashed out, like fallen asleep. Bird and I both fell asleep for a couple hours, and Bird had fallen asleep through most of the movie. Like, he ultimately will tell you that he enjoyed it, but he fell asleep through a considerable amount of all of the really, like, deep shit towards the end of the movie. And I don't blame him for that, because it's kind of a tough movie. It is about dealing with your innermost traumas. And it is very point blank about showing you the traumas the characters experienced. And those traumas are pretty dark. And there's so much I could say about this movie that as I was rambling about it, kind of giving my preamble, talking about my history with Marvel, and it started occurring to me that it's going to take exactly as long as it took me to do that preamble, which was like 15 minutes, as it would take to break down each individual thing I could talk about with this movie, that it became hard for me to sort out, like, okay, do I need to just go through the whole thing in order and talk about everything? And while I'm sure that some of the stuff I would say is unique, like, I could talk about this movie more than once. I could come back to it later if people really want to hear me talk about it in that level of depth. You know, it's a fairly successful movie, but I'm not really known for Marvel talk, and when I have done Marvel talk before, it didn't really resonate with my audience for the most part. But this movie, while I could talk more about, like, the metatextual bit, like how it speaks on the way that Marvel's going right now, that kind of stuff's not going to be as interesting in the future. And what is interesting to me, what I'm actually going to carry with me, is the level of emotional reaction I had to the movie and why that is. Like, investigating that has been the most interesting thing to me over these last 4 days, as I, you know, parse down all the different thoughts I've had about this movie. And it's like, well, okay, do I really care to be the one who analyzes in depth every aspect of this script and what it's saying about its place in the Marvel meta? Do I want to break down every single character and their arc and try to give, like, a thorough review? Not really. That doesn't sound that interesting to me. Just because I can do it doesn't mean that it would be, like, a great video. It would be fucking long if I did it unscripted. If I did it scripted, it would take fucking long. So, again, it's not something that's impossible to imagine me doing. It just seems overboard for this movie that no one's really, like, banging down my door to hear my opinion of. The people who are the most interested are, like, members already. So I think they're going to be probably the most interested in the most unique parts of my take. So I'm going to try to narrow in on that, because, you know, listening back to the 30 minutes I just did, I feel like I gave the broad strokes of my opinion. I guess I would just add to that, I really love the villains in this film. Like, that's the biggest thing I hadn't touched on yet, is that I really appreciate that, like, the CIA coordinator lady is, like, somebody who's been set up in other movies, but not necessarily as a villain, but the way that she's revealed to be one, she is kind of like a scenery chewing, like, Cruella de Vil type villain, but that is also what makes her like memorable. And I like that she doesn't have any powers. Like, she's threatening just through her manipulation tactics and her position within the government, and the fact that like the heroes are not just going to outright murder her, you know, because she's not going to put them in a position that they could legally do that, you know. Although the people that she's threatening are like, the threat is more like, will they slip up and kill this bitch, kind of. And especially so with Void, you know, which I legit was not anticipating somehow. I wasn't thinking about it in trope brain that this guy would be the villain. Like, I was only thinking about him as the love interest for Yelena as soon as I saw him. Like, the second I laid eyes on him, I'm like, okay, that's the guy Yelena's gonna be, like, in love with, you know? Partly because I thought he was hot and, like, the type of personality I'm attracted to, so I was like, okay, since I relate to Yelena, this guy is obviously gonna be her boyfriend, you know? Because I do think this movie does a great job of, like, statistically finding the pocket of people like me. Like, people who are desensitized and cynical and overly analytical, but still want to like things. Like, that's the core of what this movie's about, is, like, no matter how broken down and dark and, like, depressed or cynical you might be about, like, you know, having been through so many disappointments throughout your life and losing friends, you know, so many times, doesn't mean it's not worth trying again, finding new friends, trying to protect those friendships, you know, and being ready to face those losses all over again, but continue to be empowered by, you know, the struggle to maintain what you've got, because it's better than letting it go. If you just let it go, you end up with nothing, you know? And that's sort of where Yelena starts the movie, is there's just no spark. There's nothing to motivate her. There's no sense of purpose in her life. She's just, like, murdering people all the time and suppressing any feeling that she would have about it, because she's just been doing it for so long. She's numb to the concept of it. But that doesn't mean it's a good reason to keep doing it. And while she is, like, legally justified, and therefore in the eyes of, you know, the American government, morally justified in doing that, it doesn't mean that she necessarily feels that way, or that, like, this is the best use of what she can do, you know? It's just that it's basically all the government will let her do, or else they're going to eliminate her, and turns out they're going to try to eliminate her anyways, you know? So, like, in the early part of the movie, I was connecting to it more in a, like, okay, this film is doing a good job of statistically pocketing me as an audience member, as, like, a person who's willing to see an MCU movie in spite of the burnout, because I like Yelena, you know, and she didn't really have that much of a character yet. Like, I think I'm one of the very few people who stands this character, and one part of it is loving Florence Pugh's acting, but keep in mind, I was not a Florence Pugh fan before this movie. I've never seen Midsommar. So I'm not, you know, I'm not like a stan of Florence per se, but I loved her performance of this character in Black Widow, which is a movie most people didn't see or didn't care about until much later, if they happen to see it on Disney Plus like me. So, like, and in that movie, she has the beginnings of being the person she's going to be in this movie, but she made an arc in that film from, like, not even attempting to give a fuck to attempting to give a fuck. And so in this movie, it's sort of like she's trying to elaborate on that desire to give a fuck and, like, figure out how to do that. Like, how, okay, I want to give a fuck, how do I do it, you know? And the way that she puts it to CIA director is, I want something more public-facing. And so by the end of the movie, she puts her in the position of being the de facto, like, leader of the new Avengers. I guess actually Bucky maybe is the leader. I don't know who's considered the leader. The Wikipedia article said Bucky was the leader, and I was like, I don't feel like they established that in the movie, but whatever. Bucky is the weakest part of the movie to me. He is basically just there to, like, be put into a new plot, you know? Like, he's there to save everyone's ass, to be, like, a strong enough guy who's on their side to get them out of bullshit, like, a well-established character. forgot to empty my recently deleted folder there. Yeah, Bucky's the weakest part of the movie. I love Yelena's dad. Ghost, while I appreciate that this movie sort of sets up the idea that the reason she's never really been much of a character is that she simply did not have much of a life. She grew up in a lab as an experiment. There's just not much to her. And it's really not until towards the end of the movie when Yelena calls her out and just kind of says, like, you are just not even a good person, that you kind of get a sense of, okay, yeah, like, she's someone you like, you want to like her because she's cool, you know, but, like, there's not really much to like, and that's kind of the point, is, like, you know, are you willing to start trying to make yourself likable? And it seems like she's on the path towards that in a similar way to how Yelena was in Black Widow in this movie, but she doesn't even have as much of an arc in this as Yelena did in that, because she's not as important to the plot. So it is a little disappointing that Ghost had so little to do. I really hope that she has a proper character arc in a future film now that they've bothered bringing her back, you know? Knockoff Captain America guy I thought was really good. I only saw the first 2 episodes of Captain and the other fucking thing, Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But he was basically the same guy in that as he is in this. I assume he has a similar, like, it seems like the vibe of this movie is that he really fucks up big time in that show, and this is him starting to be on a redemption arc, but while still being the same douchebag, you know, like establishing him as the same type of a douchebag, but now we're gonna start trying to make him a better guy, maybe, you know. But I like, again, that this movie, that these characters are not necessarily the most likable people. They're not like the Suicide Squad, again, where they're, like, enjoying being evil, but they are having a really hard time being likable, you know? And I relate to that as somebody who has struggled. There's a black cat staring at me from the middle of the road. If that ain't witch shit, I don't know what is. Hello, black cat. Hope you're having a good night. Well, I guess the black cat was probably there to remind me what I really need to talk about, because I said I wasn't going to review every single aspect of the movie, but I felt like those things needed to be said. Mostly I want to talk about the part of me that connects with Yelena the most, because if you think of me as being mostly like baby Pluto, then nothing about that is like Yelena, you know? But Yelena's whole character is about having had her childhood taken away, that she was, you know, she from a very young age was shown unimaginable death, you know, and forced to participate and forced to just commit horrible crimes. And, like, there's her shame room, as they call it, is the woods, where she had to lure another girl out into the woods so that somebody could come out and shoot that girl in the face right in front of her. And the way the scene plays out in the movie is really brilliant, because the way the girl kind of looks like a young Scarlett Johansson, so you think maybe it's going to be like Black Widow, and then as she gets shot, you're like, oh, that was not what that was, you know? And it's pretty fucking hard-ass to show, like, a kid getting, I mean, they don't show her getting shot in the face. They do show a little girl, like, get Hiroshima shadowed, and it happened in such a way where it made me think, okay, they are going to come back from the shadows, because there's no way they just killed that little girl on screen, like, for real, in a Marvel movie, you know? Like, it was real dark the way they did it. But so dark that it convinced me they were going to come back, and they did. And, of course, as soon as everybody starts coming back, they start with the little girl, the first thing they show. I was like, yeah, of course. Because this is not a dark movie. It is a movie about dark people trying to be less dark. And, you know, with everything I said about how I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe is partly about cleaning out the seedy aspects of the Hollywood machine, and, you know, trying to hire the cleanest people, and considering that they had all this controversy with Jonathan Majors, it's interesting to see them pitching sort of redemption arc of, you know, of a violent person as a narrative. I don't know if they're going to try to bring him back or not. And be like, see, he's just like, no, I don't know. But, you know, I think they thought they had a really clean guy on their hands with that guy before, you know, things went south. So I feel like I'm fucking dodging talking about what I'm trying to talk about, because so I talked about in my 9 sides of my personality video that one of my personalities is like a ninja girl called Himitsu Mitsue, which Himitsu means secret in Japanese. And the implication is sort of that Mitsue is keeping my secrets, that she is a secret identity, you know, someone who doesn't speak. I think I said that she was nonverbal in that video, but it doesn't mean that she isn't tremendously influential in what I say, and especially in what I don't say. You know, like Mitsue is a big part of the decision-making process of my speaking. So it's not really accurate to say that she doesn't speak. It's more like she is part of the mouthpiece engineering of my talkative personalities, like Black Rose. This is my Black Rose voice. Like, this voice is, I mean, well, you know, if I went a little bit more like this is more like the, like, voice-trained Black Rose voice. But, like, you know, falling into this kind of deeper voice, this is what I would consider to be Black Rose. But a major component of Black Rose is an identification between, like, collaboration between Mitsue, Pluto, and Mavis, which are really the 3 personalities that exist in prior to Black Rose. You know, like, I'm sort of, my ability to exist is predicated on the existence of the other 3 and the agreement between them to do something together. So I feel like the 3, like, Mavis and Pluto and Mitsue are very distinct from one another, and I am not very distinct from any of the 3 of them. And in order to communicate as well as I do now, I created another personality that is X transition, or Prancer Alighieri. And I usually refer to that personality as a he, even though they aren't really like he, him. That's just, it's more that personality is the one that wears the masculine faces and is most willing to present masculine for the sake of a character. You know, is willing to be male if it suits the narrative, you know? So when I don't speak in this kind of feminine tone, if I'm dropping back into this kind of voice, I would still consider this Black Rose voice, but through the lens of the masking of X transition, you know? And so in that way, X transition is like a lens or a mask that is applied to the things that I say, but the things that I say as motivate, like, it's like, you know, like retuning, kind of like RGB lighting. Like, you know how you have a certain amount of red, blue, and green? Like, if I were to retune how much Pluto versus how much Mavis versus how much Himitsu, she really doesn't like being mentioned. If I retune how much of each of them I am using, so to speak, I can create different characters or masks that X transition plays. And so to me, a character like basically any character I've played in a video, including Digibro or Trixie, is like a mask that I'm wearing through the system of X transition. I think maybe it's like, I've come to think that X transition is less of a distinct personality as it is literally the mechanism by which I mask. You know, like, it's not so much that this is a consistent persona, because it's more like there is a consistent way that I put on masks, but it really is like tuning down the amount of Mavis in the equation. You know, like Mavis is a cold, calculated, particular with language, you know, someone who is willing to slow down and really give a lot of thought to something before saying something. Pluto and baby Pluto as like a combination, because I don't really think of baby as a distinct entity as much as like there's a spectrum of Pluto's behavior that goes from baby to like Pluto Garansh, which I would consider the adult Pluto. Like there's a spectrum of Pluto's personality, and right now it's at a low level. Like I'm communicating at a pretty suppressed level of Pluto, a pretty high level of Mavis, and a level of Himitsu that she's watching what I say. So this is like as close to being a Mavis voice as you can get, but Mavis doesn't speak innately. Mavis is innately a calculator, you know, like a questioner, someone who kind of sits in the back and watches. And so there is an amount of, again, like collaboration of Himitsu wanting me to speak, Pluto helping me to speak, that turns me into being Black Rose. And so at this level of communication, I would consider myself to be Black Rose. But this isn't Trixie speaking anymore. This isn't the authoritative presidential, you know, person with all of the answers that would be doing the film review. And so I'm by being Black Rose, I'm like less accelerated than I would be. I would describe it like X Transition is a book of masks. Deep Peace Figment is how I would describe just the fact that my mind... Deep Peace is just basically the description of my intrusive thoughts. And more, that part I've just been kind of trying to be like less upset with, but also more strict with, like just kind of, hey, I'd prefer not to think that, you know, not so much like beating myself up over the fact that I have intrusive thoughts, more so just like interrogating them and, you know, questioning, like making sure I understand where they belong, you know, like whether this is something that should be, you know, how basically just understanding how to emotionally react to my intrusive thoughts in a way that's not self-condemning, but also not like not embracing the thought itself or encouraging it to continue. When I cough like that, it means I'm switching personalities, and I'm guessing I'm Trixie now. That usually means I'm Trixie now. So I guess I've taken over. What does that mean exactly? I guess I would say that Trixie is the product of more general agreement. So, like, if Deep Peace is, like, the tormented part of my consciousness, it is reined in enough that I feel like I can speak more of my Himitsu, if you will. Like, Himitsu is supposed to be suppressing Deep Peace, basically keeping Deep Peace in check. But they kind of have like a love-hate relationship that right now is skewing towards love. Like, Himitsu and Deep Peace are at peace with one another right now because Deep Peace has figured out, I guess, you know, what to be proud of, or like what to talk about, or like what to embrace about itself, you know, like it's learned a sense of shame, maybe is the way to put it. And Himitsu is like all of the shame. Mavis doesn't feel shame. Pluto, if she feels shame, becomes a baby and goes to bed, you know, like if Himitsu feels shame, she gets angry, either angry at herself or angry at whoever made her feel shame. So I think of her mostly as an angry edgelord little ninja, but she has grown up. Himitsu has grown up as much as anyone else, mostly through performing Black Rose and performing, you know, other characters so much. And you know, being the ninja, she is a master of disguise. So in that way, like there are moments where I feel like I've truly regressed to like a state of being an emo, like teenage, not even teenager, like preteen. Like I would say Mitsue really came into existence when I was like around when I was getting into Linkin Park, you know, like just finding an outlet to just think other people needed to shut the fuck up, you know, and just die. Like I had never considered that other people needed to die until I was like 10. And there was at some point amid like a level of bullying where and just like lack of reaction from the rest of society and feeling like totally stonewalled and like unable to communicate with anyone, where I was just like, I wish everybody would shut the fuck up and let me talk, you know. And that's the Mitsue. That's where she comes from. Is like, maybe I'm just gonna have to silence everyone, you know, in order for Pluto to get a chance to speak, you know. And all Pluto wants to talk about is how much she loves Diddy Kong Racing, you know. Like it's really that simple. But like nobody would listen. So at some point, that rage became this angry little, you know, ninja. And the reason she's a ninja is that the rage is impotent. And that's a core, I think the reason Deep Peace and Himitsu have found that peace with one another is that they are convinced of their own impotence in rage. Like, I'm just not an angry person. I have anger inside of me because it's useful. It's a useful trait to be able to put people in their place and walk people down and express your anger and make sure people understand like where your boundaries are. But it doesn't mean that I actually would kill somebody, you know. I would simply remove myself from the situation. When it comes to fight or flight, any master will tell you flight is always the best option, you know. And even if I may not be a master in any form of martial arts or self-defense that would even allow me to, like, you know, kill somebody who was actually attacking me, I would probably just get killed. You know, like, I think of myself as more or less a prey animal. I surround myself with people who are able to protect me. I try not to be... I don't want to be the one who's determining whether I live or die if something much bigger than me comes after me. You know, like, I'm probably dead. I'm not big. I'm not, you know... I would prefer to stay hidden, to be evasive, to not be in the line of fire in the first place, you know, just not put myself in harm's way to whatever extent that's possible. And like that was me being like, let's not create dramatic irony where this car fucking opens fire on me. I'm constantly paranoid about getting killed in a drive-by, and I don't really know why. I gotta cut this clip because my arm hurts. So I've kind of found myself taking the opportunity of making this vlog to sort out a bunch of feelings about my personalities. Some of this is stuff I hadn't thought through until I'm saying it now. Like, I'm really realizing things as I'm saying them, which is why I'm going into so much depth. But at the core, what this movie spoke to is the Mitsue inside of me, the secret keeper who knows every bad thing I've ever done and is swallowing it all deep down and trying to pretend it never happened, never talk about it, you know, never think about it, never wallow in it. And there's an extent to which, you know, you don't want to wallow in things and like and blame yourself, but if you can never connect with other people and like see the humanity in what you did, it's hard to move past it. Like, there's a level of forgiveness you need towards yourself and your circumstances. And a lot of this movie is kind of the main characters all like they have these arguments where they're kind of trying to see who, almost get into who had the most tragic backstory, you know, competition. And it's interesting because they all have an attitude of like, oh, whatever, my backstory's dark too. But it's like, have you ever really admitted that, you know, before you had to be sort of challenged to rise to the occasion of someone else's darkness, you know? Like, I surround myself with people who are going through a lot of the same things I am, who you know, haven't fit in for most of their lives, who have dissociative problems, who have dysphoria, you know, people who are suffering the same way that I'm suffering, because for one thing, we've all found coping mechanisms for certain aspects of it. And so we can trade those with one another and, you know, help one another to cope more. And then also there's just the recognition aspect of like telling somebody something and their reaction isn't, I don't know how to deal with that. You know, like if you have problems that most people don't deal with, especially people who are around you, then how do you fucking talk about them? You know, like usually it just makes people depressed to hear about a situation that they consider to be much worse than theirs. But if their situation is actually as bad as yours, it could be really comforting to know that somebody else is actually down in the thick of it like that, you know? And there is a lot of imposter syndrome in the Discord server I run, where there's, you know, there's probably like 100 active users who on some level are trying to decide or determine how much they fit in or are a part of the thing. And every single person in there has the same level of it, the same level of like, is this really, am I really in, you know? And I'm going to make another video about this, but for now I'll quote something I'm going to talk about in that video too, which is a quote from Alan Watts where he says, the time you spend walking around telling yourself you're not it is the very same experience as it. And I'll break down what that means in that other video, but that's kind of also a theme in this movie of the characters keep kind of they're all kind of convinced that they can't be the hero because they've all done too many bad things. And in this movie, we watch them all kill like a lot of guys. And sure, they're all bad guys, you know, but like contextually, but it's not presented in like necessarily a heroic way. It's like just very cut and dry. This is what they had to do to survive. They killed a bunch of people. They're not happy about it, you know. But towards the end, when the situation goes south, there's a whole sequence of all of them saving people just by instinct. They see people in danger, they save them. And the danger becomes overwhelming to a level that's like Lovecraftian, right? It reminds you, okay, these guys, they may be badasses in the sense that they can save people sometimes, but they are still low-level heroes who can't handle like a cosmic threat that exists in the Marvel Universe. But because of the fact that through that good old Dark Souls knowledge is power logic, Yelena realizes, actually, this may seem like an unstoppable Lovecraftian threat, but it's really a psychological threat. It's not actually a physical problem, it's a mental problem, and I know about mental problems because I have mental problems. So if I can reflect with this person in a way that we both deal with the same, if we're both facing similar types of trauma and we can cope with them together through our unique, through our shared understanding of them, then we'll be able to move on, move forward, cope together, do things differently, share strategies on doing things differently, and be the different person we want to be. So, with all of that in mind, I think, like, watching this movie made me want to be more honest. It made me want to, which is already something I've been trying to do in the first place. But it's a tough battle for me because I have a lot of weird hang-ups and insecurities about who I think I am. Like who I thought I was in the beginning, I guess. Because when I was growing up, because I moved so much, there was nothing really consistent in my life except for like a list of facts about myself that I knew and the presence of mostly my mom, but my parents, and at some point Victor. And so like there were these consistent things, and there was like furniture that I would literally like cry when we got rid of the furniture because I was attached to it because it was one of the only things that was always, that had been there for like more than a year, sometimes. So the things that I thought I understood about myself, I really clung to those pieces of information. And as time went on, those things would be challenged, and I would very slowly open myself up to new things. And by the end of my teens was when I really started appreciating that, like, the more I open myself up, the more I'm going to find, more things that I love, and I'm not going to spend as much time kind of wallowing around, not really feeling anything, being dissociated, which is how I've spent a lot of time in my life. And since my mid-20s, I've done a great job of going out and exploring and seeing, the last 10 years, the amount of stuff I've gone and done and seen just totally dwarfs the first 20 years of my life. I feel like I basically did nothing up until I was 25. And then the first 3 or 4 years of things I did were largely regrettable. So, and plenty of the things since then have also been regrettable, but I've done a lot more non-regrettable things mixed in with that. So it's only the last 4 or 5 years that I've done a lot of things I'm really proud of. And this year has so far been crazy good, where I feel as though even when I'm feeling really out of it, like I have been the last few days, I've built a working machine, and so I don't feel like if I stop turning the gears that the thing just shuts down, which is how I felt for most of my career. I've always felt like as soon as I stop putting in maximum effort, then it means that I'm just fucking myself. If I'm not constantly working to keep the thing going as fast as it can go, then it's just going to slow down, and it's harder to get momentum every time you try to start it back up, And so now that I have this Discord community, even when I sort of find myself pulled back by my state of mind, just kind of dissociated and not getting anything done, on the one hand, I feel some of the guilt I've always felt of letting people down, because there's a lot of group projects I'm involved with, and this happens all the time where I'm working on something with people and then I just kind of become really hard to reach. And honestly, the best way to deal with that is to just keep on my ass until I just fucking, at some point I'll just do it, but it's hard for people to want to do that. Nobody wants to be on your ass like that, but it's, to me, it's it's just a circumstance of the fact that I'm just that out of it, and I think a part of being less out of it is being able to say what's on my mind more often. And again, I don't want to say every random fucking off-kilter, bizarre thought I have, which is why part of this involves thought policing myself, literally being okay, well, here's what you're not going to keep thinking, but also a level of knowing how to communicate with the people around me, but also keeping around me people who I know how to communicate with. And that's been more and more the case, that I have these people in my life. And it used to be that I did so much of my communication was tied to my job that I felt like I always had to be in character, anybody I'm talking to, basically, with the exception of people who are just in my personal life. But now I've got people who I'm involved with creatively who I'm also capable of being honest with. And so it's how honest do we want to be together? Do we want to, because we feel unguarded around each other, do we sell that to the world because it's more filled my phone again, so I gotta make this quick. It's never been a territorial thing. It's never been someone forbade me. It's always been I'm insecure, but it's not even about how I look per se. It's just about the idea of sharing something that intimate, and then I don't know, that being like, I feel like for a lot of people, there's this anticipation that if you're at that level, it means you're all the way intimate with somebody. And I don't think that I think everybody can draw their own lines about what are the levels of intimacy they have with different people. And you don't have to think of it like an all or nothing thing, you know, which I think is what causes people to really be fixated on one person and just not wanting things to be complicated, which I understand, especially with scheduling. Scheduling is the hardest part of polyamory. But scheduling that doesn't disappoint anybody is what I mean. Is the hardest part of polyamory. But me even talking about this is me really being very open. And I know this is a members only video, but that doesn't mean this information can't escape into the world. And it's not even that I would care if it does. It's just there's something in my brain that like has rules about who I am from when I was a kid, or expectations I had about myself, that reality has broken and I have to navigate. Do I think that I'm worse for that, or like less myself, or do I think I'm better and more myself because of that, you know? And like, what are the things I've done that make me feel like they reflect my identity, and what are things that I would never do, like the current me just would never do things that past me did, you know? So there's a level on which I feel like I have to decompress my trauma, but there's also a level on which I don't associate myself with that trauma anymore, where it's like, yeah, these are things that I'm haunted by, but I'm shaped by the fact that I'm haunted by it, not by, you know, like, so it's basically, I think what I'm trying to say at the heart of this, to conclude this review before I run out my phone again, is that, like, this movie made me really think a lot about who I'm telling what, because I have content that I make that is public, but it is complicated, and so it doesn't get a lot of attention, except from people who like complicated, nuanced content. That is level 1 of, like, hiding, you know, of, like, being more honest because I have put up a shield. And then there's level 2 of being more honest, which is this, members only vlogs, you know? And then there's actually, this might be level 3, but it's hard, it's debatable. Either this or the Discord is level 2 or 3. The Discord has like 100 people. The members will eventually have hundreds of people, maybe even thousands. So, you know, if people go back and they see this video, it will eventually have been seen by more people than how many are in the Discord currently possible. The Discord also has a ton of people. I kind of hope not. But so these are the different strata on which it's like, I know that the people who are seeing this, I trust a little bit more, but I don't necessarily trust people more because they give me money. That's why I would say this is level 2, than because I have rapport with them and, like, talk to them every day and I know them as a person, you know, which I feel like the people in my Discord, I know who they are, even more so than a commenter, even more so than a longtime viewer who I know at least what you know about me, you know. I actually know the people in my Discord, so I'm willing to be more honest with them, but that also, there's different levels for different people. You know, there's some people who I trust them, like, as in I know they can keep a secret. And then there's people who I'm like, okay, I know that you would love to hear this as a friend, but if I tell you this, am I going to hear about it in a podcast later? You know, like, so there's always different levels of trust with different people, but, like, there's also a level on which there are things that I'm just never gonna say to anybody, you know? And I think Mitsue... Okay, I filled the phone again, and there's not that much more I can delete to make space. So this is the end, all right? I love you all. Thanks for being members. Thanks for letting Mitsue ramble kind of through me. You know, we're the new Avengers. Yay. Good movie. Sent me for a real fucking inward spiral. I'm probably gonna make a few more vlogs soon, especially that one about imposter syndrome. All right, later.